on last week who gave his views on it, and we're now going to hear from Joni. But when Joni was communicating to me via email, she mentions that suntan lotions could also be a problem as well as the sun, and I was interested to find out more. There are a few words which may seem strange when we're talking to each other. Sunscreen, suntan lotions, the same thing. And there's a couple of abbreviations as well. FDA is the American Food and Drug Administration. And we talk about SPF, which is the factor. So factor SPF 15 is factor 15. I was so entranced with the information that Joni was sharing that I forgot to mention that while I was asking the questions. Is anyone listened back and thought, whoops, I didn't clarify what the abbreviations are. So one more time, FDA is the Food and Drugs Administration. And if you hear SPF, just think factor. So I wanted to know at the beginning why Joni was interested in cancer and why she studied the subject, and that's what we're going to start on.
My husband was diagnosed with cancer in 2004 after he died 2 years later at the age of 2006. Many things went wrong with this treatment, and since then I've dedicated my life to raising awareness of cancer through 7 books that I've written that are available on Amazon, by the way, and 8 radio programs that I've launched, including Cancer SOS, Caregiving SOS, Treatment SOS, and these are available on UK Health Radio as well.
As this is a travel show, I'm covering suntanning. Over in the UK, we're all encouraged to use suntan lotions when out in the sun. But is it true there's no evidence that these can actually prevent skin cancer?
You know, John, that's a trick question. Sunscreen is supposed to protect us from harmful UV radiation from the sun. But as more people use sunscreen, amazingly, the incidence of skin cancer has continued to rise. I think that's partly because it gives you a false sense of security. You go out to the beach and you slather on your sunscreen and you think you're all set. You get SPF 100, and then you go in the water or you sit on the beach and different things happen, and we're going to talk about some of those risk factors today. But it makes you wonder, could the chemicals that are in sunscreens actually be contributing to causing skin cancer? And we'll discuss the best sunscreens to use later in the interview. But also, I wanted to mention that more and more studies show that people have a vitamin D deficiency. And interestingly enough, that's being linked to breast, colon, kidney, and ovarian cancers, and many other disorders. I even saw some evidence that perhaps it contributed to Alzheimer's dementia. So, vitamin D comes to us from the sun, and it strengthens our bones and our immune system. And sunscreens can block beneficial vitamin D. So, as with everything, it's a balance. And just because we purchase something from a store doesn't mean that it's good for us and has only good things in them. And marketing in our country, I know, and in Europe as well, is very important. It depends on the suntan lotion. And the skin is one of the most unappreciated organs. And we slather products full of toxic chemicals on them every day. Some people are even allergic to the ingredients in suntan lotions. So what do? Oh, we're going to talk about that this interview.
With the SPF levels, are some of them misleading, or can you take them as read?
Well, they're very misleading, John, and really what you need is something between 15 and 50 SPF. Anything above that is just it's false protection. And again, it gives you slather on 100 SPF and you think, well, I can stay out in the sun as long as I want. Well, that's not true. And so really this has been a struggle to have people understand that just because you have a higher SPF on doesn't mean that you won't sweat it off. So it's very misleading. So SPF isn't everything.
When I'm lying by the pool when I'm on holiday under a sunshade, because actually I'm not a fan of the sun, I get a whiff of people using sprays now instead of lotions. Are the sprays better to use or are they worse?
Well, I actually have bad news there. Actually, the sprays are not good. And trust me, they're very popular because, there's no muss, no fuss. You don't get it all over your hands. They're better, when you're trying to catch fast-moving kids. But unfortunately, as with all sprays, there is an inhalation risk, of course, again, chemicals. And it's hard to get a thick and even coating. But the FDA has actually threatened to ban sprays unless sunscreen companies submit more data, because there's no way that they can say that they don't pose a safety hazard. So please, and again, we're going to talk more about good sunscreens and things to look for through the interview, but whatever you do, don't spray them on your face or anywhere where you can breathe them. Try to, if you do use them, try to make sure that you're not breathing the ingredients. And the best thing to do is just not.
Okay. I'll try and force people near me never to spray them, because I'm forever breathing in their stuff.
It is bad. I hate to say it, when they share it with you, isn't it?
It is, and I'm a grumpy so-and-so as well, so that doesn't help. You're listening to The Travel Show with John Guinn on ukhealthradio.com. I'm speaking to Joni Aldrich at the minute. We're talking about skin cancer and protection and suntan lotions or sunscreens, FDAs and SPFs and all sorts. As I mentioned right at the beginning of this show, somebody might wonder why I'm speaking to somebody from America on this subject, seeing we're UK based. But as I said, lots of us go over to America and the Caribbean, so we will be buying the products that are available in the United States if we don't carry enough of our own. So that's what I wanted to find out now was there much of a difference between the stuff that's available in the USA and the stuff that's available in Europe?
Well, it's interesting because I've never really thought about that, but I did a lot of research on it knowing that we were going to talk about it. And it does look like that Europe does have some high standards for UVA protection because they have more chemicals approved. Now, I put emphasis on the word chemicals, okay? But it seems that yours are better to protect against UVA radiation. It's interesting because we've actually looked in the U.S. Merck has applied to the FDA for permission to market a sunscreen ingredient called 4-MBC, which is a UVB filter. Most people know there's a difference between UVA and UVB. UVB is actually where you get the vitamin D. Researchers have detected 4-MBC in European women's breast milk and in wildlife. These findings are troubling to researchers because laboratory tests suggest that 4-MBC disrupts the hormone system. So what we're going to talk about today is good for both. Less later in the interview, we're going to talk about what to look for when you buy a sunscreen, and that is not that much different between America and European, although yours tend to be less toxic overall.
Some sunscreens add a vitamin A. Is that the MBC stuff you're talking about? Or is that a separate compound? And
no, that's a separate compound. Yeah. Vitamin A is called retinol palmitate. It can actually harm the skin. Government test data shows that skin tumors and lesions on animals treated with this ingredient and exposed to sunlight. So, vitamin A is not a great thing. It's supposed to reduce the signs of aging, but it's not a UV filter. So it's not really even an essential sunscreen ingredient. However, again, later in the interview, one of the things we're going to talk about is we need natural vitamin A and vitamin C through our food. So eat your vegetables.
There's another chemical I found when researching the questions. It's oxybenzone. I think I pronounced that correctly, but knowing me, I probably haven't. If I have,
nope.
What is it?
That was correct.
All right, that makes a change.
Oxybenzene, of course, is a common UV filter in sunscreen, but unfortunately it's also a hormone disruptor and an allergen. So oxybenzone. See, I did it wrong that time. Oxybenzone is really not a great thing to have in your sunscreen. So please look for one without it. And parabens, we're going to talk about that later too.
So with all these additives and the problems, is there much disagreement in the US between consumer groups and the FDA over suntan screens?
That's a funny question, because there's a disagreement between the FDA and consumer groups on everything. Yeah. But unfortunately, the FDA, as with many cosmetics, they're not really very good at regulating cosmetics or sunscreens as much as they are pharmaceuticals or food, believe it or not. And so, they kind of let their guard down a little bit. They have gotten a little bit better. But the UVA protection will not improve until FDA approves the use of modern ingredients that provide stronger protection. It's interesting because government approaches that by passing laws, and President Obama signed the Sunscreen Innovation Law Act, believe it or not, a law to speed the review of new ingredients, which have the potential to dramatically improve the UV protection of American sunscreens. Now, again, that's American sunscreens. But, there's just so much that we as consumers need to be aware of. So do your research. The web is a great place to do research on different ingredients, some of which we're going to talk about today, that can be bad for your health.
You can follow me on Twitter @holiday_hut. I've always been told, do what the experts do. Unless they're a TV repair person, and they don't do whatever they do. Especially when the TV repair person was me, and I used matchsticks to ram wires into the mains plugs. I had backs off tellies. I mean, after all, I got my first electric shock at 4. But anyway, for everything else, do what the experts do. So the next question I put to Jane is, I asked about how she prepares to go out into the sun.
Well, I'll be honest with you, John. I like some time out when I can actually get some sun without sunscreen. Now, I say that very cautiously because, of course, different people sunburn differently. There are two things that affect whether you're going to get sunburned or not: how sun sensitive your skin is and how strong the UV rays are that you're exposed to. And, when you go on vacation, like, for example, we're talking about today, you've got to be aware of what the UV index is where you are. A lot of people take these wonderful Caribbean cruises, and they go out on the deck, and they go that very first day because they want that tan. They want to look good in their evening gown tonight, have a little extra sun, and it does give you a nice color. But unfortunately, if you get sunburnt, your vacation's over. So we need to realize that factors like altitude, latitude, and the reflective nature of snow, sand, and water can turn a mild burn into a serious case of lobster skin. And of course, that's never pretty. Red and blistering skin is not very sexy. I met a woman just this week. We were predicting the tropical storm coming in, and she had come for the long weekend, and the very first day you wanted to get as much out of it as possible because the storm was coming. Well, she was absolutely miserable. The front of her legs and her feet were burned. So the best solution is, how do you prepare? That was the question. Proceed cautiously and start out slow if you can. Go out into the sun if you can between 8 and 10 a.m. in the morning, or from 4 to during the summer here, it's beautiful, and the sun's shining all the way up to 7:30, 8 o'clock. So try not to get those hours during the middle of the day. And consider your children, too. Their sunscreen is different, so make sure you bring along both. And, again, look at the ingredients for the sunscreen. A beach blanket is a must. You used to see them a lot. Nowadays, I see more often than not just kids sitting in the sand. The sand reflects 25% of the sun's rays, giving unsuspecting